I think we're going to see people spending more time in academics, more time trying to learn. Now, it may not be academics the way we define it today, but I think what we're going to have are people going deeper on topics and actually understanding them, because they'll have the opportunity to have assistants that help them move through that journey faster. I think schooling is actually going to improve, which goodness knows we need.
Matt Wyman is an entrepreneur, founder,
and the CEO of Ocareo,
a fast-growth AI startup.
Whether it's a startup or another role, if you go through the entire process and you did not learn anything, which is unlikely, but if you learn very little, that's a failure.
What's your advice to entrepreneurs on how to secure capital?
In
this episode, I'm speaking with AI entrepreneur Matthew Wyman. Make sure you click the subscribe or follow button, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
Matt, you're building in the AI space. How do you think AI is going to transform the world over the next 5 years? It feels like every day more innovation is happening than used to happen in a month. Like, what have you got your eye on? How do you think over the next couple of years the world is going to transform?
Well, I'm spending a lot of time thinking about the daily work that we're doing and the different modality we're using with AI. Right now, I think people are just learning how to go back and forth and use, ChatGPT or some other tool to look at emails or help them with a small task. But this is just scratching the surface. I think the question I have, how does this change the actual definition of the jobs? I think what we're going to see are new roles, new jobs appearing that we obviously can't imagine. And this is sort of the usual question that all of us are asking ourselves. I've got kids who are entering into college and they're asking the same question. Over the next 5 years, I think we're going to see some really significant shifts in how we think about the roles and responsibilities that people are performing. And in particular, if you're not somehow adapting to these current technologies, you're going to be left behind. Unfortunately, that's not a very specific answer. And I just don't have the one specific, it's absolutely going to do X. I think we're just barely scratching the surface. And we're only just now seeing some of the more vertical solutions coming to market. So we'll find out.
I know we are 1% of the way into the AI journey in reality, and already so much has happened. And it's a really good point about, people going to college right now. I mean, my kids are 2 years old and 2 months old, so I don't have to worry about that for a while. But when they get to that age, I do have a question as to if college will even be a thing, because it seems like as those vertical solutions that you mentioned there start to happen, each one of those could be a real job which gets automated, and as that starts to happen on scale, I hope new jobs will be created, but there is some questions around, will it be a little bit different this time, given that we're automating mental processes rather than just manual labor, if that makes sense?
It does. I actually think that the AGI is going to take over everything pattern is tiresome. I think that the likelihood of something that we would associate with intelligence obviously is very high, and we're going to see smarter and smarter systems exist. But then I know a lot of smart people. It's not like they have taken over the earth and no one else has a job anymore. So I'm less interested in that. And not to say that I don't think it's going to happen. Sure, it's going to happen. But I actually think we're going to see the opposite of what you just described. I think we're going to see people spending more time in academics, more time trying to learn. Now, it may not be academics the way we define it today, but I think what we're going to have are people going deeper on topics and actually understanding them at a new level, because they'll have the opportunity to have assistants that help them move through that journey faster and help them on that journey sooner. So if you're a kid that loves trains and you love math, you're going to be able to have some system that helps you link those two together, and you're going to end up going a lot further, a lot faster. And I think that there's going to be more benefit, literally just benefit in society, to people who have gone deep on topics, who can actually help guide some of these other systems more clearly because they understand it at a different level. And I think that's true just as much in engineering and the technical world as it is in the arts and the humanities and in media. I come from a family of musicians. Father's a composer. And the question is what's it going to do in the arts? And I think we're going to see an explosion of curiosity. I think we're going to see more and more people using these tools at earlier ages to go make music, to create video and share, because people love to share their thoughts and feelings and ideas, just like we're doing here. And I think we're going to see more of it, and it's going to be more specific and more interesting. It's not going to be quite as general. So I think schooling is actually going to improve, which goodness knows we need.
Okay, I like that answer. It's very different to what most people say on here, but I'm with you in many ways. That sort of Jevons paradox approach, that the more will get done, perhaps just in a slightly different way. That the artist, instead of making something with a paintbrush, they might make something with Midjourney. The musician might go to Suno and these tools to help make more music and do it at a larger degree. Is that where you're coming from?
Well, I'm coming from the perspective that people want to make connections with one another.
Yeah.
And the existence of AI is not going to stop people from wanting to make those connections. And most people want to feel like they are contributing into the world around them, which means people want to pick up tasks and do tasks. So the concept that the AI is going to suddenly show up and no one will have a job anymore and everyone's going to shut the door and stay in a dark room just doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't mean that the economic impact won't be huge. So what I'm not saying is that we're going to see no economic impact and everything's going to be, an improvement. I think actually we're going to see huge displacements. I think we're going to see a lot of question marks about what are people's roles, which is why earlier I made the comment, I think the roles and responsibilities will change, the titles of jobs will change as people go deeper. But ultimately, what I've seen is that people want to be a part of a larger trade of information and ideas. People are interested in creating things and doing work and getting their proverbial hands dirty. So my belief is that we're going to adapt. We're going to adapt these systems into our daily lives. So sure, I think economic, I'm sure lots of people are talking to you about economic impact, and there's a lot of fear, which I understand. I just also believe that we see, or that I see an opportunity for people to shift what they're doing on a daily basis.
The definition of AGI is really hard to pin down because everybody I speak to has a different one. But do you believe we'll have a universally agreed upon definition, which most people would put their hand up and say, yeah, I think we've achieved that, within, let's say, 5 years from now? Like, what's your AGI timeline? What's your view on this?
Sure. It's a good question. This brings out my cynicism. I think we're going to be told when we have AGI. I think that people already are interacting with ChatGPT and feeling like it's smarter than it actually is. I'm having to regularly help people who aren't in the industry back away from thinking that the ChatGPT is actually answering questions and is aware, and they're always surprised when they get responses that aren't. So I think humans are actually very poor at distinguishing between a communicator and intelligence. I think we've seen that over the last 2 years. So I think the question of AGI and when we have AGI, to your point previously, true intelligence that can actually pick up any task and perform any task in the world, I actually think we're quite a ways away from that, because to me, I'm gonna set my line as being any task in the physical world, not any task in the digital world. So I think that we have a lot of other systems that need to catch up. So I don't think robotics is quite there yet. I think there's some really interesting things with robotics where we're starting to see walking. We're starting to get systems where they can actually walk a little bit, but nothing close to what a human can do or any other mammal on the planet. So I'm going to set my bar for AGI as being able to take action in the real world, whether it's through specialized interactions or through robotics. And I think that's, at least 10 years away. And I think on the other side of it, we're going to get all sorts of hype and be told that, oh, such and such is now X% of intelligence. And I think that's largely going to be hype.
It'll be really interesting because I agree that AGI will happen when Sam Altman says it's been achieved, so probably, or Elon, whoever makes the marketing claim first, basically.
And not only that, they've already set themselves up where they have to make that claim. Because they've been making similar claims and they are driving huge budgets towards it. They're going to have to make some sort of claim of success over the next 2 to 3 years. And I don't know if that'll be very distinguishable from what we're already seeing.
This is a quick message to tell you about my company, Alpha AI. we built Lisa, the world's first AI recruiter who finds candidates for you on autopilot. Visit welovealpha.com now to learn how it works, or click the link below in the description. And now, back to the episode.
Okay, moving away from AI, you've raised millions from investors for your companies. So a lot of people that watch this show, they are really struggling to just get a meeting with a VC or build a pitch deck or actually have that conversation and get an intro. What's your advice to entrepreneurs on how to secure capital and how to do the fundraising process?
I've been through this a few times before where people ask, and it's always very different for every founder. I think your approach to the market has to be very different. It's based on your personal experiences, where you've worked, where you've been, and it's highly dependent on the type of product in the marketplace that you're actually trying to sell in. So for example, right now with AI's big, if you came out of DeepMind, you're just going to get an immediate audience just because you came out of DeepMind. At the same time, if you're trying to, create the next version of a lending system, that might not be as interesting, but in 2008, that would have been vastly interesting when we had the mortgage meltdown. So unfortunately, I think that a lot of this has to do with your alignment to the market that you're actually in, and has to be specific to that. So if you can highlight your relevance to that period via either academic or, more importantly, through work experience, that's the obvious and best answer. What I'm finding really ultimately works is getting out into the world and going to events, and going to small events, not big ones. Find small meetups that are specific to what you're trying to do. Even something, there was a gentleman in the Bay Area who's a recruiter, and he would hold these small events, which would have maybe 20, 30 people in it. And I met one of my investors at one of those events, and we met casually. And that was the first person to invest in my company, but not for another year. It wasn't right then that it happened, but that was where I met him. And I think that if you can do it, it's incredibly useful to make those personal contacts in the community. Again, very specific though. You got to make sure that the event is topically in the area that you're locating, and it has the right kind of people in it, etc. I don't think there's a magic bullet. I do think a lot of it is, whether we like it or not, a lot of it's connections, and it doesn't hurt to have some history. I was very fortunate in that I was C-suite for many years, so I had many interactions, so there was already a network there. So when I wanted to go out, there was already the opportunity to, reach out to folks that I knew, may not have known them well, but at least I could reach out. But I've also helped mentor folks and help folks find their routes, and I think quite often it's through those personal connections that you can make in person if you're in the region where the VCs are.
Yeah, and that's kind of step one, like be in SF or New York or London, and preferably SF, because if you're not in one of those places, it is infinitely harder to do those things that you mentioned. I mean, there are other countries and regions that are emerging and becoming very, very liquid with VC money as well. So it's not a blanket rule, but it's a great starting point.
The other choice in the same vein is to go with an incubator.
Yeah.
And if you can get into an incubator, and goodness knows there are many of them, and quite often there's a counter pressure not to do so because of concerns with equity and whatnot. But I think they're incredibly valuable. I happen not to have done an incubator for Acario, but not only do you get the opportunity to meet other founders and be in a community, but you get visibility. And I think that can be immensely valuable. And potentially you even get some early design partners and customers, either from your fellow incubator cohort, but also from folks that are looking. But any way you can get that sort of visibility, I think, is incredibly valuable. The last but not least I'll say on this is, as we all know, and for good reasons, not all VCs are the same. So even if you're looking for a pre-seed VC, there can be a significant difference between East Coast, West Coast, European, et cetera. The expectations are different. The thesis can be different. So those of us who've been through it, it's like, yeah, this is all, you know this implicitly. But if you haven't been through it yet, it's really important to spend that little bit of time, so a moment to think about, well, wait, what is the orientation that I'm looking for? does it actually meet the type of product that I'm hoping to build? If you're hoping to build a services company and you go to a series of VCs that are focused on product, it's just going to be a miss all the way down the line. And not everyone recognizes or understands that they are misaligned with the people they're speaking with.
Yeah, I love your point earlier around people that don't have a network creating one themselves, because I understand in many senses the reason why most VCs won't just accept a cold outreach and it has to be from a warm intro, because it's like the first test of a founder. Like, can you network your way to an introduction? And if you can, then you might have trouble getting customers or getting employees, because that is a skill that you do need to learn. But if you don't have that network, the best way to build it is just going to those local, very small community events. And I'm with you, like, I hate huge conferences. Like, there is a place and a time for them, but for me personally, I've gotten 10 times more value just going for like a coffee or a breakfast or just like a small networking thing, because I would rather have like 10 relationships that are like worth gold than rather than 100 that are worth like bronze or something.
I agree with you. And the other, I'd say, challenge of that large environment is that you'll meet lots of people who are rushing around for some specific purpose. You get into a smaller environment, you have a chance to spend a few minutes and actually have a conversation. But one thing I've found with people who are just at the beginning of the journey, and just as much true for starting a new company, also for sales and discovery, quite often the success is judged on, well, did something happen right then? And this activity is not an immediate flag activity. You're not going to get that immediate moment. In fact, you might meet someone and then keep a connection with them, and a few months later they introduce you to someone else, and you then make that connection. And this is the whole point of networking, right? You start to connect the dots from one person to the next, and quite often the eventual positive win is 2, 3, 4 steps down the line, either different events, different people, the combination. And you shouldn't, be surprised. You reach out to person A, and it turns out they also know person Q that you met at a particular event, and that gives you a little bit more weight, a little bit more belief that you're actually building something appropriate because you've been in the community, and there you go. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a VC event, right? That's the other. Just going to a meetup, a developer meetup, is a great way to get going if you're on the developer side.
Yeah. I mean, just adding value consistently without any expectation or transactional, that's where people go wrong. They're trying to think, what's in it for me? But if you just add value, like, the universe is pretty magical. Like, some of this stuff will just come back your way without, you can ask for it, but even without you asking for it, it just tends to happen.
I would triple underscore that. Be willing to give and not expect it to just come back immediately. I think there's all sorts of reasons to look at the world and observe that if you behave in that manner and so do others around you, you actually find it does lift the collective good. And I think that in particular, this is a kind of environment where people tend to behave that way because they do see that. I mean, it is very visible, especially in developers and developer communities. If you happen to be going down that route, you see that's what's driven open source for years and years and years. And we all understand the collective good that's created. That's
right. So look, that's some really good advice on how to get investors and actually have a business that you can build. But when you're going on that journey of actually building it, like most startups, they just don't make it. And in AI, there'll be an explosion over the next couple of years of people building some really interesting solutions to problems, but that still the vast majority will die. So what do you think separates the founders who really, really win versus the majority that unfortunately don't?
Well, I mean, many successful founders originally failed. So I don't think that's for me, that's not the measure.
Yeah.
For me, the measure has to do with the product itself and whether you actually had an impact in the environment you're trying to have an impact on. So for me, failure would be that you're targeting a particular area, you're trying to help people in a particular area, and you're not actually able to have an effect in it. There are other externalities which you don't control, which may or may not create value for the company itself, and you can't necessarily predict that. And I'll give a very short example. I was the first engineer in a company, and that particular company, I was there for over a decade, and that particular company had to survive the dot-com bubble, and then had to survive the 2008 mortgage crisis. We were in fintech. And so those were externalities we had no control over. And they both had significant effects on our revenue and our growth. Now, we survived and we wound up getting acquired and everything was great. But I think if either of those two hadn't happened, or we had just been maybe 3 years in a different direction, we probably would have seen a 10x difference in our eventual outcome. And that does not make it a failure. I think we were incredibly successful, and we built all sorts of interesting things, and we made a difference in real people's lives. So to me, that's the measure. The measure needs to be, you have to be careful not to use externalities as the measure of yourself. You gotta look at it in terms of what we're able to do. And I know this is not everyone's belief, but I'm very focused on the learnings. So whether it's a startup or another role, but if you go through the entire process and you did not learn anything, which is unlikely, but if you learn very little, that's a failure. I mean, frankly, one of the hardest things to do in life, I believe, is actually birthing a startup. It would be one that requires you to do a lot of introspection about, like, well, what do I actually believe in this circumstance? How do I want to behave when I see this particular challenge? And one of the hardest things for founders to do is decide, this is not working, I'm going to move on. And sometimes that's the right answer. Steve Jobs demonstrated that in both directions multiple times. I mean, he was an amazing, inventor and entrepreneur. So I think we have to be careful not to assume that the founders are failures because they threw their hat in the ring with AI and they're trying to push the boundaries of AI. I think going back to the collective good, I think a lot of those companies are going to try to do things that we're not ready for yet. Either not ready for culturally, not ready for economically, or not ready for from an engineering standpoint. And I think all of that is going to be learning for following founders, maybe the same ones, maybe others, to come through and pick those balls up and carry them forward at a later time.
I love how you started the answer by saying that some of the most successful founders of all time have failed many, many, many times along that path. Because it's so true. Like, for every person that is super successful, they just didn't quit. They just kept going, and they probably failed more times than the person who failed and then never tried again. But these people are hyper learners. They just iterate and they get better and better with each mistake, and eventually success becomes inevitable because they've run out of failures. There's like nothing else to fail on, and they finally get there.
I agree, and I've even been in circumstances where the conversation is about failing forward. And so when you're looking for a leader, one of the questions is, have you failed forward? Because there are some amazing leaders out there who have never failed. So you got to wonder, like, well, either they're somehow blessed and they're perfect, which is unlikely to be perfect. So what happens when they do hit that wall, when they do hit that moment where it's not easy or it didn't work? Can they actually figure out how to, step back and step around, step to the side, to your point, try again? Like, you want to see that people are failing forward. So yeah, I think that should be the expectation when you go into this. You're on a journey that's unknowable, and you're going to pick up and carry forward regardless of how it turns out. So don't be afraid of it, is basically my answer. Like, don't be afraid of failure, just do it.
And if you're not comfortable and being willing to fail, you kind of shouldn't really start to begin with, because everybody sees the Social Network movie, or they see the front cover of Forbes, and they think that's what it's like. But the reality is, for every one person that makes that, there are 100, 1,000 that don't. And every single one of those people, including the one that did make it, has to go through an enormous amount of pressure and stress and anxiety. And like, building a company is incredibly hard, and you're probably not going to be successful doing it. So you kind of have to be like a little bit crazy to know all of that and go on that journey. So like with all that in mind, if you're not willing to accept that pain, then like, don't do it.
Yeah, what are you doing? I think of this as having a deep keel, like a sailing ship in a blue ocean. And I'm not a sailor, but this is how I think of it. Like, you have to be a person with a deep keel that can stay on a line and not get pushed off course just because the wind blows one way or another. And in particular, as a founder, you are constantly confronted with people telling you or showing you, well, so-and-so just got X millions of dollars, or so-and-so just got this customer. And you have to just keep playing your game and running your line. Same time, it's like the split brain. You do need to watch all those other situations to see if you can learn from them. Like, okay, what's going on that I can learn from, that I can apply? But I think if you become reactive, that's incredibly dangerous. I think that's one of the things that happens is people are imagining, to your point, they see these movies, they see these success stories, they have these heroes in mind, and they think, I'm going to be that person. And they're not able to actually hold their own vision and their own lighthouse and move towards it at the same time that they're getting bombarded from left and right with all the different comparisons, which are actually what drag you down.
Yes. Matt, this has been super useful for people starting a company, people that are trying to raise capital, everything in between. If people have enjoyed this and they want to learn more, where should they go now? Your LinkedIn, your X, your podcast you have coming out, what's the place to direct them to?
Absolutely. Well, always, I'm more than happy to take connections over LinkedIn and have conversations there, because I think it's really amazing. You get to hear all different voices. And then, of course, Acario. Come check out the company, acario.com. We're helping people evaluate their AI systems. We've got simulation for agents, and so we're really trying to help developers build the next generation of tools. So come join us.
Amazing. Matt, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Hit follow, hit subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Introducing Lisa, the world's first AI-powered recruiter. She's an AI agent who works 24/7, screening candidates on autopilot, conducting interviews in 30 different languages, uploading all the best candidates to your applicant tracking system. Hire 10 times faster at 90% lower cost and significantly improve the candidate experience. Visit WeLoveAlpha.com to start your free trial now.